Howdy. Okay, so if you're watching this, that means that I've actually been able to sit down and make a video, which hasn't happened in a while. You know, I haven't known what to say. I mean, like, I posted my detransition video, and that one got, like, a huge response. And then, of course, I responded to comments. But then I had to pick something else to talk about. And you would think that I would have a lot to say, but I probably do. I just can't think of it. And the only times I think of it are like either in the shower or the middle of the night when I can't make a video, and then I promptly forget what I was gonna make a video about. But I got something. I got something this time, and I ain't gonna forget it. But first, you're gonna have to deal with me in my gym clothes. I got back from the gym. I decided I'm gonna sit down and make a video. I'm gonna make myself some pizza first, and I burnt my pizza. It's supposed to be barbecue pizza, but it's a little bit more on the barbecue side. So I have my pizza, I got my fire noodles here, and some tea. And I don't have my notes with me this time, so it's gonna be a little bit more rambly than it's been. I'm just gonna pray to whoever's listening that I can keep it together. So yeah, I'm gonna talk about my experience with Planned Parenthood. I haven't watched anybody else's videos really about what they thought or think about Planned Parenthood. So this is just gonna be purely my opinions. Just a disclaimer before I start. I don't have the most positive view on Planned Parenthood, but that being said, I don't blame any of the medical professionals there for me transitioning. I just want to say it. That's not my opinion. That was entirely my decision. I don't blame anybody there. But that being said, what I think about Planned Parenthood, oh gosh, where do I even start? Let me just say this. I think, well, with Planned Parenthood and having hormones, I think that it's a good thing for people who are trans to have a lot more easier access to getting on hormones and helping alleviate that dysphoria. Because, when you go into Planned Parenthood, at least for me, I went in and I signed like a little consent form. They didn't really ask me any questions, and they took a blood draw, and then I scheduled to come back for 2 weeks later after the lab results had come in and get my prescription. That was it. So, my opinion first on all of that. Let me just start with that. This might be a lengthy video, I don't know. But like I said before, I think it's definitely a good thing for people who are actually trans to have easier access to those kind of services and not have to jump through a bunch of hoops just to get on hormones. Especially if you've been, living and identifying as whatever you're identifying as. It must be nice to just be able to walk in and finally, just say, hey, I want to start hormones now, and then just kind of kick that off. Although I will say that, with the whole just giving hormones to whoever walks in the door, I don't think is necessarily a good thing. Like when you go to the doctor and you want to get like a medication for something, they'll make sure you're not allergic to anything, and then they'll ask you questions, to make sure they're giving you what you actually need and not, something that's just going to mess up your body or something that you don't actually need to take. Especially if you go to a therapist, you just don't walk in to like a therapist's office and say, it's like, hey, my friend is taking whatever drug to help her whatever she's got going on. Say, for example, I don't know, it's like she's having her depression, and she's taking X drug for her depression. I want to take the same drug. They don't just give it to you. They want to make sure that you're taking the right thing to help your specific needs. So with Planned Parenthood, just kind of willy-nilly, just almost handing out hormones like candy to anybody who walks in the door, regardless if you're actually transgender or not, or just confused or whatnot. I feel it's almost disrespectful to people who are actually transgender. I mean, like, so when you, cause like they're trained medical professionals. I mean, shouldn't they be asking you more questions and like taking more care to give you what you actually need? I mean, that can't be good for the transgender community in general, anyways. I mean, because I mean, when you're just handing out hormones to anybody who wants them, I mean, you're bound to be giving it to somebody who shouldn't be taking hormones, like myself or somebody else who detransitioned. I mean, the more people you just hand it out to, I mean, that's just going to mean more detransitioners down the line if you give it to people who aren't transgender. I mean, that can't be good for the trans community because that just increases, I mean, the detransition rate. And I mean, I think that as a doctor or some like people who are like trained medical professionals, I mean, should be asking more questions instead of just having you walk in, be like, "Hey, I'm transgender. I want to take these," and then them just like, "Here, take your prescription and get out." I mean, it's like we got our money. I mean, it's like, I mean, shouldn't they care more? I mean, it just feels disrespectful to people who are transgender. I mean, it's like because if they don't, you don't ask questions. I mean, and maybe this is just me. But I mean, of course, hindsight. Because I mean, back when I wanted to take hormones, I mean, I thought Planned Parenthood. Oh my God, this is like a godsend. I mean, I don't have to go because I didn't want to talk to a therapist. Um, I mean, so I don't have to jump through any hoops. I don't have to do anything. Um, I just walked in and got it. And yes, that's on me for not knowing what I wanted to do. But I also feel like if it wasn't just as easy as just walking in and signing a form for something that permanently changes your body for essentially the rest of your life in some aspects. I think, like, if it wouldn't have been so easy for me to just walk in, I don't think I probably would have transitioned because I think the longer I would have thought about it and given it more time to think and given it more consideration, I think it may have played a part and may have influenced me transitioning at all. If it just wasn't so easy just to willy nilly on impulse just go and decide to take hormones. Um, I just think that in the medical field, I think they should have more responsibility to not just be handing it out to anybody and to make sure that this is actually, as a patient, that this is actually something that you should be taking. You know, and it's like, or at least ask questions like, have you talked to a counselor about this? Like, how long have you been presenting as trans? Because when I walked in, I mean, I hadn't ever, like, my family didn't even know. I took my hormone shot the same day that I came out, and I mean I mean, nobody. I mean, the point is nobody asked. I mean, it's like nobody. I mean, I feel like there would be a lot less. I feel like the detransition rate would probably go down if people just took more care to make sure that they were actually giving hormones to people who are transgender instead of just anybody. Um, I mean, that's just my thoughts on that. I mean, I just feel like I feel like more research should be done into what it actually means to be transgender, like, and make sure that giving hormones is to treat gender dysphoria and not to make sure that you're just having some other issues that you're confusing the two, or especially if you're younger, you know, like 17, 18, you know, 19. I mean, a lot of those people just don't know yet, and I mean, especially if you haven't talked to somebody about it like at all. I mean, that's just I don't know. That's just my thoughts. I feel like there should be more effort put in to the whole thing. Well, my mother's calling me. I'm gonna hang up on her. Sorry, Mom. Oh, there we go. Okay. But to my actual experiences, um, you know, my little tangent being said, when I did go into Planned Parenthood, um, you know, I walked in, I signed the form to get hormones, and then I came back 2 weeks later to actually get my prescription and go down. And I did, and that was the first trip that I took to Planned Parenthood was back where I used to live. I went there once, and then after I got my hormones, I moved to Spokane, and then I was going to a different doctor there, or medical professional at the Planned Parenthood that I was going to previously, and then I was in Spokane for about. I mean, I just transferred the prescription, and it was probably a month later, and I went to because I take it every week, and so I had to pick up a new prescription once a month. Um, and I walked in, and I remember going up to my pharmacy because I go to Fred Meyer's pharmacy, And I remember just going in and wanting to pick it up, and there's like, oh, you can't pick it up, it hasn't been approved. And I was like, what? It's like, they don't, I mean, I was never told anything about, I mean, they never set up, because you need it. Let me just say this: when you get hormones, they schedule you, or they're supposed to schedule you for a 1 month follow-up to test your levels, do a blood draw, make sure that it's not like destroying your liver and whatnot. I never told this. They never. I walked in and got my prescription. They never told me. They never scheduled me for anything. I mean, I wasn't given any information. I mean, they're pretty much just like, here's your prescription. You can be on your way. And so when I went into Fred Meyer's to go and pick it up, I mean, I was almost completely blindsided, because I was like, and it made sense. Like, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have to get your levels checked. I mean, you should obviously make sure that you're not like killing yourself, But I mean, so I had to call Planned Parenthood, and I was supposed to take a shot that night that I was picking up the prescription, and I was super like, I had to have those shots on the same day at the same time, like especially with the first probably 6 or 7 months when I was taking hormones and injections. I was taking them once a week, and I was really anal about that. I really wanted to be on time every time, and so when I called and they wouldn't let me get it, and I had to call Planned Parenthood, and I was like, what's going on? Like, why can't I get my prescription? And they're like, oh, well, you need to come in for a 1 month follow-up. And I was like, thanks for telling me. It's like, I had no idea I was supposed to, come in. I mean, they never scheduled me, and maybe that's just me for not knowing how shit works, but I mean, and so I talked to her, and then she's like, well, we'll schedule you for like 2 weeks from now to come in and pick it up. And I was like, are you, like, what? Are you serious? Like, I mean, this is like 2 weeks from now. I mean, that's 3 weeks of shots that I'd be missing. And so that really ticked me off. But the lady said that she could send down one more vial, because I was going to pick it up, or I got scheduled for 2 weeks from now. I was like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do in the meantime? It's like, I still have, shots that I'm supposed to be taking. And so she sent down a prescription for like 1 more month, just to extend it. And so I went down the next day and I picked up that little extension prescription, and I took that, and then I went in 2 weeks later to get my blood drawn. And so what really confused me is that you're supposed to go in for a blood draw to make sure that your levels are correct and that you're taking what you're supposed to be taking. But they didn't schedule me, and they didn't do a blood draw before they gave me the next prescription. They scheduled. I walked in, I got my blood draw, and then they handed me the prescriptions, like, here you go. And I was like, what's the point of me coming in for a blood draw and to make sure if my levels are correct if you just give me the prescription anyways? I mean, there's probably some, like, I'm not a medical professional. There's probably some reason behind it, but that one just kind of threw me through a loop. And then, so fast forward the next month, and lo and behold, I run out again. And then I call, and I don't even remember, because that was a long time ago. It was probably like a year and a half ago. I just remember it was such a hassle. It was a pain in the ass. I hated going to Planned Parenthood. Because they wouldn't call me. They wouldn't tell me anything. They'd say if something came back weird on my levels, they wouldn't call me and to tell me to come back in and reschedule. They'd just wait until I needed to pick up a refill on my prescription, and then I just couldn't pick up a refill because I never approved it. And nobody would tell me anything. I was never contacted. And so eventually, for the next, probably the first 6 months, I was going to this one clinic. And when I would run out and they wouldn't call me, I'd call and complain and be like, well, nobody told me jack shit. I need to take my injections. Like, I want to keep a regular schedule. Like, can somebody help me out here? And then the nurse would put through, or she'd send it, the lady I talked to on the phone, I think it was a nurse, and then she would send an approval form or something, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. I could be wrong. But then she'd send something up to, like, the doctor, and then they'd approve it, and then they'd send it to the pharmacy to give me 1 more month. And I did that probably for 2 months straight. They didn't make me come back in for a blood draw or anything. They just, I just kept getting approvals. And then I think like 2 or 3 months later, I came back in for like what was supposed to be my 3-month follow-up, but it was probably more like 6 6 months after the fact, and I had only gone in for maybe 2 blood draws. And then I went in for another blood draw like I was supposed to, and then I got my prescription. And not to mention that they kept giving me prescriptions that were not legal. Let's just say that. Like, because I live in Washington, and when I kept taking it to my pharmacy, you need 2 signatures on the paper, one for like your doctor and one for another. Otherwise, it wasn't a valid prescription. And they kept giving me forms with just 1 signature, and I'd take it to the pharmacy, and it's like, oh, we can't take this because it's not valid. So there's also that. And that was also an issue, that they kept giving me bad prescriptions, which I don't understand how they would not have valid prescriptions. But so anyways, so I go in and I take probably like my 6th month, and I go in, and that's fine. I go in for a blood draw. It's like a half an hour drive for that one place too, because there's also another place that I could have gone, which is much closer, but it's a much bigger, a better clinic essentially, but it was a lot busier. But see, I go in, I do the whole call for a refill thing, because also I'd go in for, say, my 3 month, and they're supposed to give me a prescription for, say, another 3 months, because I'm not supposed to come in for, say, another 3 to 4 months, but they'd only give me a prescription for 1 month. And so my appointment to come in for a blood draw isn't for 3 months from now, but I don't have a prescription for 3 months. And so that was also something that I had to constantly deal with, and I was constantly calling them, like almost every month it seems, is to say, hey, like, I need a refill on my prescription, and then they'd have to send it over, and then they'd give me another month. And I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do about the next month? Because I mean, you're only giving me 1 month prescription, and my appointment isn't until 3 months from now. And I don't remember what they said. I just remember it was a pain in the ass, and that was something that was just ongoing. I mean, this constant miscommunication of me trying to schedule things, and having it, anyways, it was just messed up. And so I'd call again, and then I'd get this prescription. And then I want to say for the next, I went in for like 2 or 3 more appointments for blood draws. And so in total, I've gone to this one place probably 4 or 5, probably like about 6 times to get my blood drawn and my levels checked, to get my prescription. And then afterwards, I decide, well, I mean, I'm gonna come up for my, whatever it was, my 8 month or my year 12 month blood draw checkup, and that'll be good for like 6 months, because I mean, it increased. You don't have to come in every month for a blood draw. I mean, that'd be like excessive. But, and so this time I decided to go to the bigger, better clinic. That was a lot closer to me. That was only like a 10-minute drive for me. I was like, okay, great. But because I hadn't been going there originally, because they had said that since they were so busy, they only did transgender services on like Monday and Tuesday, and I worked Monday and Tuesday. I was like, well, shit. But then my days off changed, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to go to this new clinic and see if I have a better experience there. And so I finally schedule an appointment with them for like a month from where I had been, and I go in for them finally. And then the first time I go in, the guy over the phone, like, I take the day off from work and everything, and I drive up. I need my prescription to get my blood drawn, and the guy who had scheduled me for the wrong type of visit. I don't even remember what it was. It was apparently just like a walk-in visit or something, but he needed to schedule me specifically for a blood draw. And so I drive all the way up there. I wait like half an hour in the waiting room, and they finally call my name. They call me back there, and then they sit me down there. It's like, okay, so we need to take your blood drawn, but you're only scheduled for like a 15-minute slot instead of the half an hour that we need you to. So we can't take your blood draw today. We have to reschedule you. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, once again, it just screwed. And they apologized. I mean, these people were a lot better about it than they were before. They tried to get the contact name of whoever tried to schedule me the first time to see what went wrong. And so I have to reschedule for another 2 weeks out. And I mean, I was over it at this point. I was like, oh my God, this is a nightmare. I was like, I got to get like a general practitioner. I got to go to a regular doctor, see if that's better. But I stick with Planned Parenthood, because I was honestly did not have the effort to try to try and get in with an actual doctor, because I wasn't familiar with that. I didn't know if I would have to wait longer or if they would require me to like do anything weird. And I was already familiar with, better the devil you know, right? I already knew how Planned Parenthood worked, so I stuck with them, and I went in another 2 weeks later, and I got my blood drawn, and then I got my prescription and left, like the other 6 or 7 times. And so once I have that, I come back in for a follow-up appointment, because they weren't sure about my levels. I remember this. They scheduled me the first time with this new doctor too. This is a new lady who I was going to, and she took my blood draw, and then she scheduled me like for 2 weeks after the original. So I scheduled 2 weeks later for a blood draw, and then 2 weeks after that to go in for a follow-up so I can discuss my levels and make sure everything's, hunky-dory. And so I go in 2 weeks later, and she basically sits me down and she says, so how much do you inject? Do you do it every week, and how much do you do? Where do you do it? And I told her, it's like, no, I'm very consistent about it. I was doing 0.5 milliliters every week, and I shot up in my thigh. That's where I did it. And I did intramuscular injections, and I asked her, is that fine? And she's like, yeah, no, where you're doing it and how you're doing it is fine, but your testosterone count, what we want you to be at is to be between 300 and 500, right? That's what your level's supposed to be. And she said, you're at 1350. And I was like, 1350? That's like 3 times the amount of testosterone that I'm supposed to be at. And and she told me this, and she's like, I don't know how, she said, you must have some sort of sensitivity to it, because you should be nowhere near this high with the amount that you're injecting. And I told her, I was like, I only do the same amount every single time. It's like, I swear to God, I do it correctly. And I've been doing this for a year now. And she's like, I don't know why the other doctors kept giving you this, but you should absolutely not be at this level. And so I'm like, well, shit. And she's like, yeah, well, I mean, it's obviously like the bad effect. I mean, it can like screw with your body for having that much testosterone when you're not supposed to. And not to mention is that when you take that much testosterone and your body gets like almost overwhelmed with too much, to compensate for it, it just converts it back into estrogen, and that does the opposite of what you're wanting to achieve. And I was like, oh, great. So that also contributed. And I told her, it's like, okay, this entire time I've been massively over what my levels, what I'm supposed to be at. I went in probably 6 or 7 times and got 6 or 7 different blood draws from this other place, and nobody called me and told me that my levels were that far off. They just kept giving it to me. And another thing of what I was talking about earlier, I mean, it's just like when you just walk in and they just give out these hormones willy-nilly to everybody who walks in the door. I mean, my levels were almost at I was told that they were at like a danger, like you are not supposed to be that high. You're essentially, it's not doing what it's supposed to do. I mean, when you were 3 times over the limit, what you're supposed to be doing, and it could be potentially damaging. I mean, God knows, well, I don't know what it would have been doing if I had kept taking that much. But I've been at 1350 for a year, and I had gone in and they had drawn my blood 6 or 7 different times, and nobody told me. Nobody called me. I mean, I was never scheduled for a follow-up appointment, and it's just like the lack of care for people who are transgender. I mean, just on like a basic medical level. I mean, if your patient is having a bad reaction or an overreaction or whatever to the medicine that they're getting, you need to tell them to either lower the dosage or do something, because I mean, if I hadn't have switched to that new bigger, better Planned Parenthood, to the new doctor, I mean, I probably would have never known that my levels were that high because nobody told me. And I mean, like, if you say a transgender person takes that and they have an oversensitivity, or they're taking the wrong amount and they're never told, and say your body does overcompensate and just convert that back into estrogen or testosterone, whichever one you're taking, I mean, that's doing the opposite of what you're not even essentially medically transitioning if it's just converting it back into estrogen. I mean, it's like, I don't need more estrogen. And it's like, why was this? I mean, it just screams just the disrespect. We don't care. Here's your shit and get out. I mean, so I think all of that should be a lot more regulated. I think that just as a basic medical provider, I think you should at least show that you care more than that. And yeah, so like, I want to say probably 3 or 4 months after I was dealing with the new place that I went to was when it was about a year and a half of me medically transitioning, and then that's when I decided to detransition, and I just, because they actually gave me a prescription for 3 months, like they were actually supposed to. They were a lot better about it, but and then I decided, of course, to detransition, and I'm not taking hormones at all, anyways. But so yeah, my experience with Planned Parenthood was not necessarily a good one. I'm not happy with it. I'm not happy that I was just given hormones, but I mean, that's part of that is on me, for deciding to take them. I mean, that part is my fault. But just like I said before, just the blatant lack of care for your patient, and to just keep giving you meds that are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and not tell you that they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, that doesn't help transgenders at all. I mean, that doesn't help anybody. And I think that people who are trans deserve a lot more respect, especially when you're medically transitioning, than what some people might be getting, like me. And maybe not everybody's experience is the same, but I mean, they're probably helping some other trans people, and so what if they're having the same issues? I mean, it's just, I feel like people who are, like, the transgender community, I feel, deserves a lot more respect than to just be, I mean, I feel like it should be treated with at least the same level of respect as everybody else. I mean, I don't think that somebody who were to come in for, I don't know, like birth control or something, and say if that wasn't working, I feel like that lady would get a call immediately if they tested her levels or what. I don't even know if they do that with that, but say whatever, something that's not, anything that's not hormones. I feel like it would be just treated differently, and that people would definitely be getting a call if it's screwing up your body. But that's just me. That's my thoughts. That's my opinion. So that's what I dealt with Planned Parenthood. I wouldn't recommend going through Planned Parenthood. I would recommend getting a prescription through either like a doctor or a therapist, and not just being handed it to you. I feel like if you're a doctor and you don't even ask questions, you just hand somebody something that's going to permanently change their body for the rest of their life without even asking hard questions or suggesting to talk to a therapist to really think this through before you do this, because this is a permanent change that you cannot go back on with certain aspects. I just wouldn't say I'd have a lot of respect for those kind of doctors or medical professionals. I feel like that just shows that you just don't care. And like I said, I just feel like the transgender community and just people in general just deserve more respect than that. Especially when you're trusting somebody with your medications in your body. So that's my thoughts. That's my ramble. I don't think I did too bad. I think it was a better ramble than we did last time, especially without notes. I'm proud. My noodles are probably cold by now, but at least my burnt pizza ain't gonna burn, I suppose. Well, I don't know. Leave your thoughts down below. Let me know if anybody else has gone to Planned Parenthood, and if your experience is like the same or drastically different. I'd honestly like to know. If it was just me, if it's just that specific place, or if that's just kind of the general level of effort everybody tends to give there. So yeah, let me know. Thanks.